When Cassie's mother took the stand, she immediately seemed to be very emotional. And during the course of her testimony, she was fighting back tears, especially when photographs of Cassie with bruising were shown to the jury. She was asked to go through a black binder of these photographs and explain what they were and what they depicted. She could not hold back her tears while she spoke about the violence that Cassie suffered at the hands of Sean Combs. One of the first questions that prosecutors asked was, how do you know the defendant? And she said she knew him as Sean Combs. And when they first met, he was Cassie's boss. Now, during the course of her direct examination, the prosecutors referred to him as Sean. This is different than some of the other witnesses where he was Combs throughout the entirety of the testimony. Regina Ventura's testimony focused on an email that she received from Cassie in December 2011. The email said that Cassie was afraid that Combs was going to send somebody to physically harm her. And not only that Combs intended on releasing at least 2 sexually explicit videos of her, either right before or after Christmas. Cassie's mother also spoke about $20,000, which Combs demanded of Cassie. She said that Combs had spent $20,000 on Cassie and that he was very angry that she was dating another man. So he demanded that $20,000 back. Well, she and her husband did not have the money to give that to Combs. So they actually took out a home equity loan. They received an email from Combs's bookkeeper and they wired the money according to the directions that were in that email. She said the reason that she did it was because she was fearful for her daughter's safety. One of the most emotional moments in the courtroom was when prosecutors handed Regina a binder full of photographs that she took of Cassie during Christmas of 2011, right around the time that email was sent. The photos depicted Cassie with terrible bruising, and these photos were shown to the jury. She went through each photo one by one and explained that she took the pictures because she wanted to memorialize them. She wanted an account of what had happened to Cassie at the hands of Combs at that time. She also said that this was the first time, that email and Christmas of 2011, that she became aware that Cassie was in an abusive relationship with Combs. Something that was interesting, there was no cross-examination of Cassie's mother. I understand why. This was an emotional witness, the mother of someone who the defense has conceded suffered domestic abuse. But there was something that stood out to me. With respect to that $20,000 transaction, no documents were presented to the court to corroborate that the money was actually transferred. And Cassie's mother testified that at some point that money was returned. She said she did not have the email from the bookkeeper where the instructions for sending the money was located. That was something I thought would have been approached on cross-examination, but the defense opted to stay quiet. David James was Combs' personal assistant from the year 2007 to 2009. And some of the critical components of his testimony was explaining how Combs' operation worked. He was with him day to day. He worked long and grueling hours. He also identified some of Combs' security guards and other personnel who were likely to see as this trial unfolds. We saw a whole bunch of pill bottles that were actually submitted into evidence, and they had a fake name on them, Frank Black. Now, we've heard this name before. We heard that Combs would check into hotels under this name, the very hotels where he was engaging in freak-offs. So Frank Black is obviously an alias. The prosecution is going to say there's a reason why he used an alias, not only to check into these hotel rooms, but also to acquire different types of pills because he knew he was doing something illegal. That all goes to the intent element of any RICO conspiracy charge. Combs' assistant testified that Combs made him take multiple lie detector tests during the time of his employment. Now, this is all more on that aspect of control. It's about what Combs has over certain individuals in his employment, that there is force, fraud, or coercion. And this overarching idea that the prosecutors have put forth, that all of these acts are in furtherance of a larger criminal enterprise. David James' cross-examination was amazing for the defense. The defense was able to really chip away at this idea that all of the people in Diddy's sphere are working in furtherance of a criminal enterprise. For instance, James testified that he was in Saint-Tropez with Combs and that on his own and with another friend, they acquired an 8-ball of cocaine. Well, he was asked multiple times, did you tell Combs that this was something you were doing? The answer was no. He also testified about another time where he and one of Combs' security guards met 2 girls at a bar. Turned out they were prostitutes. He brought them back to Combs' home. But guess who did not know? Combs. So this is what the defense wants to establish, that all of these individuals the prosecutors are going to put on the stand regarding the RICO charge are actually independent bad actors, that they've done things on their own and without Combs' knowledge. So long as it's not a part of the conspiracy and the furtherance of the organization, those acts cannot be something that leads to Combs' conviction. James made another very important distinction for the defense. What's paid for by Combs' companies versus what he pays for personally. Some of the items that were personal were lubricants, baby oil, all of those things that are used in the course of a freak-off, according to Cassie Ventura's testimony. That was a distinction the defense wanted to get on the record, to say that this is all about Combs' personal life. This is about what he does in the bedroom. It has nothing to do with a larger criminal conspiracy. And remember, part of the RICO charge is that all of Combs' businesses are really shells for the furtherance of a criminal enterprise at his behest. So this testimony was excellent for the defense. James also testified about an altercation that he had with Jordan Atkinson. This was Combs' personal chef. He said that he was in the kitchen with Jordan, and they basically had a fight about who was responsible for what. It was a coworker fight, and that he told Jordan to stay in your effing lane. Now, this was really big for the defense because prosecutors had characterized that very statement, stay in your effing lane, as a threat to keep Jordan quiet. But James' testimony completely undermined that narrative. And it turns out this was just a fight between 2 coworkers about what tasks they were supposed to do. So for the defense, this was a huge win. Another witness that took the stand today, Sharay Hayes, an exotic dancer also known as the Punisher. He's testifying about interactions between Combs and Cassie. This is critical to the prosecution's charge of the Mann Act. This is crossing state lines for the purpose of engaging in prostitution. The Punisher is going to be the one to establish this for the prosecution. The Punisher testified that in 2012, he was contacted via his website by a woman named Janet. She wanted him to come and do an erotic scene in a hotel room for her and her husband. Well, when the Punisher arrived, turns out Janet was Cassie Ventura. She greeted him in the hotel room wearing a wig and a bathrobe, but nothing underneath. It was then that they created a scene, and she said that her husband was going to come up, and she paid him $800 in cash. Turns out her husband was actually Combs. The Punisher described the room in detail. He said there were electronic candles, sheets covering all the furniture, bowls of water with baby oil in them. He came into the room. He was sitting on a chair. Cassie was sitting on a sofa. At that point, they began to apply baby oil on each other. And then her husband, who is Combs, came into the room. He was nude, but the Punisher could not see his face. The Punisher's testimony is important for prosecutors for 2 reasons. First, it corroborates Cassie's testimony, specifically relating to sex workers being involved in Combs and Cassie's sexual encounters or freak-offs. That is the Commercial Sex Act, which prosecutors must establish in order to get a conviction. The other aspect that is critically important for prosecutors is the element of control. In Cassie's testimony, she said that, yes, she did help to orchestrate the freak-offs or the commercial sex acts, but it was Combs who really was the one to call the shots. And so here, the Punisher testified that while he was in the room and they were engaging in these acts, that it was Combs who was directing the movement and was directing Cassie. This is going to speak to that element of control and ultimately to the prosecution's argument of force, fraud, and coercion, a critical element of the sex trafficking statute.